Well, I think that makes it 6 o'clock. The clerk says we're ready to go. We can get started.
Sorry, just 1 second. Your worship, make sure we've got it on YouTube.
Thank you.
We're good to go, Your Worship.
Okay. With that, I will call the meeting to order for this committee of the whole, Monday, May the 17th, 2021. I welcome all attendees and all audience members. I appreciate you being here for the committee of the whole. As usual, this is a virtual meeting, but all rules of conduct, pertinent legislation, etc., apply to this meeting as if it were held in person. And if any member of council's connection is lost during the meeting or is disrupted during the meeting, we will pause for a few minutes to allow that member to reconnect. But assuming we have quorum, we will continue the meeting shortly thereafter. With that, I will note that Councillor Porter sent her regrets for this evening's meeting. So with the call to order complete, we have an agenda before us. Right? Is there anything to add to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, can I get a motion from council to approve the agenda? From the deputy, seconded by Councillor Townend. Thank you. Any comments or questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? I'm seeing none. And we'll move into the business of the meeting. The primary purpose for the meeting is the hub project update. We have a report before us, and I believe there's a presentation. Mr. CAO, who's going to be making the presentation this evening?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's going to be a team effort. So I would just ask council if they would save their questions to the end, and then we'll go back to the slide that they may have the question about. It's a comprehensive presentation, and as I said, it was a team effort. And so tonight, can we share our screen, Deb, please? We have quite a few slides, but they go through them very, very quickly. Great. Okay, so the next slide, please. So tonight, we'll review the 2021 capital project information sheet. We'll go through the status of the current pool. We'll look at the preliminary business plan for a new pool. We'll then go into a green and inclusive community buildings grant, which is a new grant that we'll review with you. We'll also review the Federation of Canadian Municipalities project loan grant. That's been around for a while, but we'll review those criteria with you. We have partnered with FCM in the past, so this may be another opportunity. Mr. Renier will take us through some financial plans, and then there are a series of recommendations at the end of the report. Next, please. So just a review, this is taken right from the budget binder of 2021. So for this project, it's the capital project information sheet. You can find it in your budget binder. There is $206,000 in carry forward funds from 2017. So that was meant for initial planning. And I refer to that in the recommendations at the end of the report. The information sheet calls for the raising of $2.5 million in 2021, and council approved that as a card holder really until after this meeting and perhaps subsequent meetings take place. The project to raise finance, the project to finance, we were estimating at that point at $22.5 million in 2022. Of course, that was the initial estimate, and what we'll be presenting tonight will certainly change that figure. And then we'll also look at some partnerships as well. So the information sheet talked about partnerships. We'll be looking at municipal partnerships, some community fundraising, naming rights, and Jenna and Phil will actually talk to those later on in the presentation. So as I say, there'll be several speakers this evening. So the next slide, please, Deb. I would just ask Lori if she would introduce Carrie Lamb, as this is Carrie's first meeting, and I don't believe council has had the opportunity to meet her.
I haven't seen Carrie turn on her video yet, but Carrie, is she? Okay. Well, council, this is Carrie Lamb. She's our new Recreation and Facilities Manager, and I've been very impressed by her in her short time that she's been here, and I'm excited for her to share with you the work that her and her team have been doing on an operations plan for the facility. Carrie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Lori. Your worship, members of council, it's great to be here. This is day 1 of week 5, and I have been very busy trying to get up to speed on the project and determine the needs within the community, the current status of the facility itself, what stands today. So I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown on what the infrastructure looks like today, and then talk a bit about a operations plan moving forward with the new facility. So Debbie, if you could change the slide for me, please. Thank you. So just a quick rundown on our current aquatic facility. It is over 45 years old. Construction started in 74. I understand it officially opened in 76. The average lifespan of a pool is replacement around year 40. So we have certainly extended the life cycle of our current facility. We have certainly outgrown it as well. There's limited opportunity right now to grow our programming and rentals use within the community for the pool, but we certainly have increasing demand. So that's something we're considering. Because the building was built in 1974, it is certainly out of date. You'll see in the next points that we talk a bit about not meeting the current standard for accessibility, both in the pool and the arena. Not meeting life safety and infrastructure safety programs such as no sprinkler system. There's poor exiting, dead ends where corridors just end and there's no exit. And then of course we certainly have poor and failing infrastructure. There has been a lot of work been put in over the years to try and extend the current life cycle of the pool, but that is turning into a costly venture. So if we could certainly move forward to the next slide, Debbie, thanks. So I'm going to talk a bit about the infrastructure issues themselves. The deck slab is resting on the basin walls. So just to give you a very quick education, with the deck slab resting on the wall, it's causing pressure pushing down, and the slab underneath is being undermined. My apologies. So with it being undermined, we're getting cracking in the basin wall, and we're getting cracking right underneath the slab. The cracks in the basin walls and the floor are critical issues. We certainly see more and more cracking happening. It's causing seepage, it's causing shaling, it's causing the finish of the pool to prematurely deteriorate because of those cracks. So we're having to make frequent repairs, and with frequent repair comes emptying the pool more, refilling the pool more, which puts more pressure on the pool. And every time you empty that pool, you're looking at about 675,000 liters of water. So it's a lot of water that we normally wouldn't have to empty a pool that often. Also with the seepage and the cracking, we're certainly seeing a lot of water loss. We're actually anticipating that with the new pool being an 8-lane pool versus a 5-lane pool today, that we would actually see a reduction in annual water usage with the new facility, even though it would be a larger pool. We can go to the next slide, please, Debbie. So this is just a couple of examples. My phone is actually quite full. I've been down in the well. Figure 1 is just a sample from the bottom of the pool basin of a crack that has been repaired several times and then painted over. The one on figure 2, this is the shallow end wall. So you can see the extent of the cracking where that long dark line is above the X. That is a crack in that deck wall sitting on the wall of the basin, and you can see the rusting coming through from the rebar through its bleeding into the pool area. What's happened is this has been repaired several times, but because the infrastructure is deteriorating, it's just going to keep coming back. So just wanted to show 2 examples of what we're going through with the pool to date. So Debbie, if you could change, thanks. Outside of the pool basin itself, there's the pool drains, pumps, and the filtration. As you can see, hopefully you can see clearly on the right-hand side, there are no deck drains, which causes issues, certainly doesn't meet code today. The pool main drain is non-compliant. It's too small for the current pool and for current legislation. And we are certainly not running the most efficient infrastructure. We're not reclaiming any heat loss to recycle back into the facility. The plumbing lines are a variety of different types of material. They all should be PVC, including the valves, and they're not. And quite a few of them are actually undersized. And then the filtration system is below standard as well. It doesn't meet the current regulations. As it relates to the ventilation, ventilation is where people would complain about things like red eyes, dry skin, those types of things. So no chloramine removal is happening at the deck level or on top of the pool. So we're not getting that clean air coming in and the filtration happening. We're also having issues in the change room of ventilation. That's forced us to increase our maintenance level in those washrooms, change rooms that we normally wouldn't have to do. So things like addressing mold issues, remove mold, painting on a regular basis, those types of things. And of course, there's the accessibility issue in the change rooms, and they're just not quite big enough based on the demand. So if you could change the slide for me, Debbie. Thank you. So as we consider moving from our current facility into a proposed new facility, we don't want to look at what is just needed today. We need to look at what's going to be needed in 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We certainly don't have a crystal ball, but we need to be able to make some estimates on what business is going to look like as we move forward. As Amherst View and Loyalist and Bath and all of our communities continue to grow, how are the facilities going to need to grow with it? So what I'm going to talk about next, we'll talk a bit about the new facility and what it will look like tomorrow. So in the new facility, we will look at a lap pool, 8-lane 25 meter. We're currently a 5-lane 25 meter. We'd also be looking at a smaller, warmer water pool that is more of a leisure pool that would be ideal more for our older adults and or for our small children. It would allow us to expand programming and rentals. And obviously it would give us a fully accessible community space where everyone in our community would be able to access and utilize the facility with dignity. It's not just about the pools though. We certainly need to look at what accessories or what ancillary services are needed to accompany the pool. One would be what we call a wet classroom. So it would be adjacent to the pool area where you could run your training courses, clinics, workshops. If you're running NLSS courses, they can come out of the pool, go in, do dry land in the wet classroom, and then get back in the pool. Birthday parties. When you're hosting competitions, which this facility would be ideal for, the 8-lane pool is critical if we want to host events and competitions. That room would be ideal for an official's office, volunteers, things of that sort. And then, of course, we need to look at all of the services that are needed to run that facility. So everything from change rooms to what facilities are needed if we're hosting competitions, things like viewing areas, galleries, open space. And then as well, how are we providing service areas for the pool? So everything from guarding office and staff space to storage. There's a lot of equipment that comes in with running a pool, not just mechanical, but actually programming equipment to deliver the services needed. If we can move to the next space, there we go. So what does this all mean in terms of programs and potential revenue? Certainly, we would be able to drive more revenue out of a new facility. The increased pool size means that we can grow our programming, whether it's Red Cross programming, whether it's drop-in programs like Aquatics, Aquafit, things like that. Advanced Life Saving Society, things like your Bronze Medallion, your Bronze Cross. These are the courses that are critical for us to continue to grow aquatic leaders in the industry and for us to continue to have succession planning to staff the facility. We'd also be looking at increased rentals. So right now we have a high demand from the local swim club. There would certainly be some potential for some pool time with other swim clubs, birthday parties, private rentals, the ability to partner with people like the school board, Swim to Survive school programs. And then as well, there's the ability to work with organizations and agencies in the community that deliver services to such people as our older adults in our community, and or businesses who, I'll give a for instance, it could be a business that wants to come in and offer aquatic therapy for someone recovering from a surgery or an injury, things of that sort. The new facility and having more time and more space in that pool would certainly lend to that type of increase in revenue. And then, of course, there's competitions. The competitions is really an economic development driver. It would bring people to the area for multiple days, bring them into our community, into our facility for competitive meets and events. And this would allow us to work with our regional partners to bring more events to the area. So if I can have the next slide, please. So the revenue impact is definitely a great one. We would definitely be improving our levels of service. So we'd be increasing those levels and meeting the resident needs. We'd also be increasing revenue from programs and rentals. And then as well, we'd be looking at those economic development, as I already spoke about, the competition, the events, and then of course, potential new partnerships. So with a community facility, it is not necessarily about what the township can always deliver, but who we can partner with to help facilitate services for the community. So things like the school board, agencies, healthcare organizations, and businesses. So if I can have the next slide, please. The expense side, I'm sure many of you are asking, okay, so it's a bigger facility, we're gonna offer more, what does the expense look like? We would certainly have improved infrastructure. There are plans in place moving forward to look at as much efficiency and green energy as possible. Relating to how are we recovering heat loss, how are we cycling the arena mechanical into the pool so that we can be as efficient as possible. So there are utility savings as well as the water, which I already mentioned. The larger pool, we would actually use less water than what we use today. There is the environmental. We certainly want to reduce our carbon footprint. And then, of course, maintenance. And it is always much more efficient and better on a budget to do a preventative maintenance plan than it is to be reactive. In the long term of the infrastructure, you will see savings if you are being preventative in your maintenance programs. If I can have the next slide, please, Debbie. So overall, my message would be that the community hub will provide an improved level of service at no additional net operating pressures to the township, to the operating levy. And that is done through the increased revenues and the savings on expenses through the facility. We'd be increasing a level of service without increasing the tax levy, if you will, for operating. So one last slide from me, because we certainly, from a community and customer service perspective, we want to ensure that our community is involved in the project. So we would be looking at continued community consultation throughout the project where appropriate. We'd be consulting with the general public, members and of the facility, both past and present registered customers, community groups such as the swim club, the recreation committees. We'd be looking at contributing partners and how can we consult with them. and then of course other potential partners. So these would be agencies, the school board, things of that sort, and then as well our internal stakeholders. We'd be turning to members of council for consultation, as well as our staff. They're in the facility day in and day out, and know what customers are asking for and see how the facility operates. So from the community and customer service end, that would be our presentation as it relates to this portion of tonight. And I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lamb. Who's up next?
Here I am. I was talking and I was muted. Thanks, Carrie. So Jenna is going to just review some of the intergovernmental funding that we have available to us. So I just asked Jenna to take over now, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. So as Steve mentioned, I'm going to talk about 2 potential intergovernmental funding programs that are available. The first is the Green and Inclusive Community Building funding that's offered by the federal government. This funding, there are 2 streams. There's a retrofit, repair and upgrade stream and a new build stream. So an expansion of 30% or greater of an existing building's floor space is considered a new build project. Anything less than that can be considered a retrofit. Based on the scope of our project, and since we've only completed conceptual design at this point, we are not 100% certain on which side of this 30% marker we fall. So I will just summarize both options today, and then Phil has a couple of scenarios once I'm finished to present based on either of those options. So the retrofit stream is more desirable because there's more money available upfront. So $860 million available for all of Canada through this stream. And large retrofit projects between $3 million and $25 million are available in both of these streams. The new build projects, there's $430 million available. Next slide, please, Debbie. Thank you. So the focus of this program is on areas with underserved populations that are experiencing higher needs. So they're looking for programming and activities to demonstrably serve these populations. For example, we're looking to improve accessibility both within the pool area as well as the change rooms and the arena facilities, and this will allow for additional users of the entire facility. Multiple applications can be submitted from one organization to this program. So it would be possible to make a submission under each of the retrofit and new build streams if that was something that was desirable. On the next slide, the scheduled intake for projects of our size has a due date of July 6th, 2021. So we're working toward that, depending on council's direction this evening. And next slide, please, Debbie. Thank you. So the criteria for being eligible for the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings funding are that it's being used in a non-commercial community-oriented space that provides open, available, and publicly accessible community services. So this includes community, culture, and recreational facilities. Spending between April 1st of this year and March 31st, 2026 is eligible. So we're already in the eligibility period for the funding program. Submissions to the program must include structural information, and structural reviews for the facility are complete at this time. We also need to include an energy profile and greenhouse gas reduction summary, and this work is in progress. Retrofit projects must not lead to an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. We believe that this project will result in substantial greenhouse gas emission reductions, which is great. That's for the retrofit projects. Climate change considerations. So the impacts of climate change need to have been assessed and considered. The detailed design process that will be undertaken, if approved by council, will be undertaken through a climate lens to determine opportunities to mitigate for and adapt to the impacts of climate change. They also request that the highest accessibility standard is met, and this project has plans, some of them were discussed by Carrie, to vastly improve accessibility of the aquatics environment as well as other areas of the facility. And it will most definitely meet current standards. And then a commitment to funding, which is what we are here tonight to receive council direction on. So on the next slide, the retrofit program is focused on green measures and accessibility and safety. So for the green measures, they request that you have at least a 25% reduction in energy improvements. So based on initial review completed during the conceptual design, we believe our project can attain approximately 40% improvement or greater in energy, or 40% or greater reduction in energy. This is based on some of the operations improvements that were mentioned by Carrie, as well as the potential to use the waste heat from the arena to heat the pool water and other areas of the facility. There's also a preference for efficiency improvements, which is a focus of the project, and a focus on the reduction of carbon dioxide or equivalent. So we anticipate that a more than 50% reduction in natural gas usage will be possible through the project, and natural gas, as compared to hydro, has the highest impact on CO2 equivalent reduction. And then we also anticipate additional reductions in hydro usage for the facility. In terms of accessibility and safety, the planned improvements will include the installation of an elevator to allow access to both stories from inside the building, and other important accessibility upgrades to the aquatics facilities and change rooms and the arena area. Well, on the next slide, it summarizes the evaluation criteria. So based on the evaluation criteria, we feel that the project is very well suited to this funding program. So they're hoping for projects that can start as soon as possible, and we've completed the conceptual design and think that it's possible to have further design activities well underway by the time the application is due, if council wishes to do that. The next criteria is to serve one or more community with high needs, and the project will allow more families and seniors to access the facility, and also will allow everyone to access these services in a manner that respects dignity and independence. In terms of accessibility, I've spoken about some of the planned improvements already. The greenhouse gas reductions I've also spoken about, and also the energy savings. And then in terms of climate resiliency, we're planning to build that into the design. And then they look for confidence in delivery and risk. So township staff have experience dealing with large capital projects, but we do acknowledge that this project is not typical for the township. So we will continue to review our needs for support and make recommendations to council on resources needed to ensure that we minimize risk in the delivery of a successful project as the project moves forward. Next slide, please, Debbie. Thanks. So this is the evaluation criteria for the new build. So they're looking for projects that fill a missing or distinct gap service requirement where critical infrastructure is lacking. So in this case, the question would be about maintaining the aquatics facility in the township. They're looking for projects that are built to net zero or net zero carbon or net zero ready. So that's what our project would be planned for. They're looking for climate resiliency, which I've spoken to already, and accessibility as well. And then the other criteria that they use for evaluating the projects is generally the same as the retrofit projects. So next slide, please. So this is just the funding breakdown. So there's a difference in the amount of funding that a project can get if it's determined a retrofit as opposed to a new build. So for the retrofit projects, it's 80% of the first 10 million, and then 60% after that up to $25 million in project value. And for a new build, it's 60% of the first 10 million, and then 50% after that. And in Phil's portion of the presentation, he'll speak to that a little bit more. So the next slide starts the second program that I'm going to talk about. So the second program is the Green Municipal Funds Community Buildings Retrofit Program. This fund is delivered by FCM. So there's $167 million available across Canada, and these are $5 million competitive loans with up to a 25% grant. So of the 5 million, 1.25 million could be accessed as a grant, while the remaining portion would be repayable under the loan. The focus of this program is on optimized energy performance and greenhouse gas reductions, and it requires a feasibility study, a building condition assessment, and an energy model, which are all items that are planned under the proposed design. This program can be stacked with other intergovernmental funding programs, such as the program that I outlined ahead of this one, and it has a continuous intake, and decisions are generally provided within 4 to 6 months from submission. The program is available for community buildings owned by municipalities and not-for-profit organizations, where the primary use is athletic, recreation, culture, or community programs or services that are offered to the local community. It's supposed to be for buildings that are widely accessible to everyone, offering services that enhance health and well-being, skills development, and economic development, and for multi-purpose buildings. So it targets high-impact retrofits with phasing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and costs over the useful life of the retrofitted buildings. And it must achieve at least a 30% greenhouse gas reduction in the short term, which, as I stated previously, we feel that this project can achieve. You can apply for this program for one building or a portfolio of buildings, and up to 30% of the reduction can come from renewable energy that would be generated on site. So this slide just summarizes the evaluation criteria for the Green Municipal Fund Community Buildings Retrofit Program. So the impact criteria is focused on quantitative and qualitative environmental benefits, financial benefits, community benefits, and relative impact. The implementation section is focused on stakeholder engagement, team and partners, work plan and budget, risk management, financing, and measurement and monitoring. And the transformative potential is very much focused on capacity building, as well as replication potential, innovation, and audacity. So how bold the project is. And we feel that this project is very much eligible for the program. It provides a great deal of replication potential. So other communities could use a similar, if they have a pool and an arena in the same location, could use a similar greenhouse gas reduction process by using the waste heat from their arena. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to Phil, but I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has once Phil has completed his portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Renier, there you are.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I'm here to discuss the financial plan, everyone's favorite portion of the programming, I'm sure. So we'll get through that there. So over the next few slides, I'm just going to, first, we're going to go over some scenarios for the capital funding of the upfront cost. Then I'll build a bit on Carrie's discussion earlier and look at the pool operating finances. And then at the end of it, we're going to look a little more big picture for the township as a whole and our debt, and where that's projected to go over the next 10 years, as financing will play an important part in this. Next slide, please, Debbie. So as Jenna said, we got 3 funding scenarios here. There was a bit of a late change to the programming. So I prepared there was scenario A, which is the full federal grant funding, and that is based on the retrofit program. Scenario B is we get no federal grant funding. And then scenario C was partial federal grant funding, which was to show what level of grant funding we would need to not impact the tax levy. And I'm going to discuss these further. But based on the retrofit or the new build, which stream we would end up in, scenario C does fit pretty well with the new build. And scenario A is more of the retrofit. So just going forward. So I'll walk through each scenario now, Debbie, if you don't mind. So under scenario A here, the full federal grant funding, just a reminder, this is based on the retrofit program. So we can see there the total estimated phase 1 project costs are about 25 million. So to fund that, we would be fingers crossed hoping for about 15.5 million from the Green and Inclusive Community Grants Program. 1.25 million is the Green Municipal Fund, and that is the 25% forgivable loan that Jenna discussed. Currently, by 2022, we're going to have just over 1.4 million in our municipal capital reserve that has been set aside for the hub. Potential partnerships, 1.5 million. So potential partnerships would be things like potential partnership with the City of Kingston for some capital contribution, naming rights, local community fundraising, that sort of those sort of initiatives. And then we do have carry forward capital budget going back a few years now as this project's been moving along for the last little bit, and that is currently just funded through general rate. So under scenario A, if we were to get this 15.5 million, that would require about 5.1 million in financing for the township to move forward. And based on that loan, that would be to finance or to service that loan would be about $265,000 a year. Now that's based on a 30-year loan at a 3.10 interest rate, which was the interest rate from Infrastructure Ontario as of the end of April. So that was kind of the estimate we used there for servicing that debt. So just go through it. So based on existing funding or savings that we already have built into our current levy, right now we do transfer $250,000 a year to the Municipal Capital Reserve Fund. We do also project that there is going to be a component of this project that will be eligible for development charges. I do have the caveat there that we are currently working on an updated DC charge study, so obviously nothing's official until that gets approved and through the bylaw. But we are projecting to service about 2 million of the debt through DC, so that's about $100,000 a year, because we certainly won't have the money in our DC account ahead of time. And then we do have net projected operational savings from the pool of 102,000. And I'll speak to that after the scenarios of how we came up with that number. So overall, with existing funding and savings, there is about 450,000 that we can use to service debt. So under this scenario where we did get that full federal grant fund, it shows there that I guess we're ahead about 187,000. But what that really would mean is that we can maintain a good portion of that current transfer that we do put to the Municipal Capital Reserve while servicing the debt. And that could be important going forward because this is for phase 1. There is potentially phase 2 coming down the road in the next 5 years as well. And or we could also maintain a level of transfer to reserve for the future capital replacement in 40 years with the new pool as we find ourselves in this situation. So I certainly wouldn't necessarily say we're $180,000 ahead, but it does give us a lot more options. So that's scenario A, which is kind of best case. Thank you, Debbie. Scenario B would, not to call it worst case scenario, but no federal grant funding. So you can see there, I have the other one-time revenues, still hoping for those. And then, but this would require about 20.6 million in financing from the township if we were to go ahead without that Green and Inclusive Community Buildings grant. So what that would mean is just over $1 million a year to service that debt for this project alone. And if we did use the entire transfer to MCRF and converted that to servicing debt, along with the DC and the potential pool savings, that's 450,000. So we would still need to come up with another $600,000 above and beyond to service that debt if we don't get this federal grant. And just to give an idea, for example, the general rate in 2021, we are servicing about $635,000 this year in debt from the general rate. So this more or less would double that on its own. And that would require about a 3.5% tax levy increase based on 2021 just to service this debt without you obviously factor in all the other capital and operating pressures. And obviously no transfer could be maintained for phase 2 or potential future capital replacement. So this is where, you know, finance gets the reputation of being negative Nellies, but this is kind of worst case scenario. And then finally, the scenario C, which I had called partial federal grant funding, which would really line up with the new build grant funding as well. And the idea of this was to show what level of grant we would need without impacting the current tax levy in order to service that debt. So that number comes in just around $12 million in a grant, plus the other things. So that would require the township to service about $8.8 million in debt. And as you can see, we'd be using the entire current municipal capital reserve fund transfer with the DC and the projected pool savings that would service the debt. So while we would be taking on 8.8 million in debt, we would be able to service it through existing means without impacting the current tax levy. So I think that's an important threshold. And just to give people an idea, for every $1 million extra we would have to finance is about $50,000 a year in terms of servicing, ballpark. Just it's, you know, the scale slides up or down, you know, if we got 8 million or 9 million, but then of course we'd have to come back with an updated projection at that point. So those are kind of the three funding scenarios. Draw your conclusions to that. Next, I just want to kind of give an idea of where that 102,000 or about 100,000 projected pool operating finance savings would come from to help service the debt. So just thank Andros, our aquatics coordinator, did a lot of work, and I know he reached out to Belleville with their new pool and other partners in the community to really come up with some projections on what we could expect from an operating point of view. I mean, as with anything in finance, and when we get into projections, they come with the usual caveats. They're based on our best estimates at this time. That's just how we cover ourselves. But based on Andros's work, we could expect about an 80% increase in projected revenues. And that mainly stems from, as Carrie mentioned, we're increasing from a 5 to an 8 lane pool. That's 60% increased area right there. And when you add on the leisure therapeutic pool, we're actually more than doubling our pool surface area. So the 80% projected revenues is a conservative and a realistic expectation on projected revenues with the new facility. Now, with the projected revenues, it is largely offset by about a 70% increase in salary and benefits. So a good portion of the employees at the recreation center are part-time lifeguards, instructors. With increased programming and a larger facility, there's also going to be a corresponding amount of staffing needed to provide all that servicing and programming. And also with the size of this facility, currently Andros is the only, our aquatics coordinator is the only full-time dedicated staff member. A facility of this size we are including a projection for a full-time aquatics programmer as well. So that is baked into our projections as well, just due to the sheer volume of the programming required for a facility of this size. So, I mean, that's definitely a good news story. The other main thing we're looking at for savings is the building cost. So based on Jenna and Rami's work, we are expecting about a 66% savings in gas, plus about a 60% reduction in water usage. And as Carrie kind of touched on, you may be saying, wow, it's a much larger facility, but the sheer volume of the amount of water that the existing pool leaks in a year is quite substantial. And looking at the number we estimate, it probably costs us about $25,000 a year in just pool and water leaking out of the pool. So it's quite substantial on the existing facility. Now, part of those savings would be offset by, we do have an increase in pool chemicals, and we would also expect an increase in insurance on a new facility like this. Miscellaneous expenses there, based on the projections, we kind of left that steady to what it is. That's just miscellaneous expenses like seminars, training, some advertising and supplies, but it's in the grand scheme of the operating of the pool, it's relatively immaterial compared to the staffing and building costs. So we want to keep that level just so it didn't completely impact. And then the other big potential savings is starting in 2019, due to the existing failing pool, we started budgeting $50,000 a year in our operating budget. And we put it in a reserve for basically emergency repairs, because anyone who's been on council the last few years, you never know when the next big expense is going to pop up. So to smooth that out, we have been transferring $50K a year into a reserve that we can then draw on if we need to, based on the existing pool failings. So with the new facility, obviously there's still going to be maintenance costs in that, but we could eliminate that $50K straight off transfer for the emergency repairs that we just wouldn't need with the new facility. So Debbie, if you can go to the next slide. So high level, the existing pool operations there. So just so you know, that's based on 2019's actual numbers, which is our last normal operating year. Didn't really use 2020 due to obvious situation. So based on that and the new pool projected revenues, you can see there about a $285,000 increase in revenues. Like I said, largely offset by salary and benefits increase, but we're still about $35,000 ahead there. And if you look in the existing pool operations after salary and benefits, we basically break even under the current model. Building, we are expecting some savings of about just under 20,000. And then if we eliminate that reserve fund emergency transfer, there's another 50,000. So overall, projected expenses would be up 183, more than offset by the $285,000 increase in revenues. So at the end of the day, right now, the existing pool puts about a $300,000 pressure on the operating, therefore the general rate tax levy to provide those services. With the new projected operations, it would be just under 200,000, or about a 35% decrease on the current tax levy. And that's where we come up with that about $100,000 number. And then we would recommend, obviously, using that savings to service the debt required to build the facility, therefore not having to impact the existing tax rate, which I'm sure everyone can appreciate. Debbie, next slide. So I just wanted to touch on long-term debt and the general rate implications. So obviously, potential debt financing is going to be a big component of this potential phase one, but it's certainly not operating in a vacuum. There's a lot of capital work coming up in the township, so we need to look at it pretty holistically. So this chart here is kind of looking at general rate implications. So the red line there across the bottom is what's in the 2021 budget. Like I said, right now we're servicing about $635,000 a year in debt through the general rate. So that's kind of what's built into our existing tax levy. So that's why I put that red line across, just to kind of give a barometer on there. And then you can see the scenarios. And I added another scenario, the blue line, which is the projected capital without doing phase one of the hub. So that would be basically, we didn't go ahead with this new pool project, and then where we would kind of fall. So obviously, if you remember back at budget time, there's going to be a big spike potentially in debt in 2023, which is really related to a big spike in 2022 capital projects. That always hits about a year later. And you can see the different scenarios. So even best case, based on our current capital plan, we're going up to about almost $1.5 million, and that's without the hub. The gray line up top there, the 2.5, that's the worst case scenario if we've got no additional grant funding. So you can see there that we're already looking at a pretty big impact capital-wise in debt servicing, and pressure is going to be on the capital levy. So it's just to highlight, the green and the yellow lines are pretty close to the blue, and that the message would be, with the federal grant funding, we're pretty close to where we are anyway. So I mean, it's definitely a lot more manageable, and it kind of gives it out over the next 10 years. So it kind of shows you where we're projected to be. It kind of levels off after 2023 for the most part, and actually kind of goes down as some debt starts falling off in 2027. What I would say is kind of look at where we're at going in 10 years. The 2022, the big spike in capital, which would lead to the 2023 debt, I would expect that it would be possibly smoothed out at some point. And based on timelines, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen in 2022, but certainly those projects would be happening within the next 10 years based on life expectancy. So just to kind of see where we are projected to go if we don't find other ways to service the debt other than the tax levy. And just a little caveat, this does not include anything projected for the potential of a phase 2 community hub, which would probably potentially happen in 2025, 2026. So that's not including these projections just because there's so many variables with that. Next slide, Debbie. So just speaking for the township as a whole, everyone's favorite term, the ARL, or our annual repayment limit. So just to rehash, for those that aren't familiar, the province has legislated what they call the ARL, or annual repayment limit. And what that is the maximum amount that the township is allowed to pay each year in terms of principal and interest to service debt without having to get special permission from the government. So, or the province, I should say. So the ARL is set at 25% of own source revenues. So for example, this year, our current ARL limit is about $7.8 million when you add up general rate utilities. And this year, between general rate utilities, we're servicing about 1.6 million, or as you can see on the slide here, we're at 21% of the overall ARL out of 100%. So this is just projecting the different scenarios of where we would be on our ARL limit, which gives you an idea of how much you are using your own source revenue to service debt, essentially. And kind of like the previous slide, I would really look out over the 10 years because there's going to be that big spike potentially, but chances are it'll probably be smoothed out with the timing of the capital projects. But overall, in the next 10 years, you can see that the no phase or the ones with the federal grant funding all project out to around 23-25% after 10 years. The worst case scenario does spike up to 40%, we'd be around 30. So just to provide some context, those red dotted lines represent the thresholds that the province uses to kind of provide municipal performance measures. So anything under 20%, they would consider low risk. Between 20 to 40%, they consider medium risk, and anything over 40% of your AR, they consider high risk. Currently, the township doesn't have a policy on what our target is. From a financial point of view, 25 seems like a reasonable approach, and that is kind of where three scenarios end up after 10 years. Just for some context as well, in 2019, in comparing us to like-minded communities, the median was 20%, so right on the border of low to medium. And under the scenarios with the funding, we do spike up into the 30s, but it does come right back down, and we would be considered a low medium risk. So that's just to provide some context on the overall long-term debt and where we would fit in terms of with all the other capital projects the township could be undertaking in the next few years. And if I didn't put you to sleep, that's the end of my finance section.
Thanks, Phil. So I'll just review the recommendations that are contained in the report for council. So the first recommendation that 150,000 be transferred from the hub capital reserve and that 206,000 from the project carryover be used for the first phase of the schematic drawings at the cost of $354,816. So we've been working with the architects. So Rami did that before he went on leave, and they gave us a pricing schedule. So the first, we use phase a lot, but the first phase of those drawings would allow us to actually determine the percentage that Jenna was talking about. Our goal is to get 30% or less so that we would fit into the retrofit category of the grant. And right now we're not certain what that is, but certainly by having these drawings, it would help. It would also, whatever we have completed by the July 6th deadline would also prove that council's commitment to the project and that we are in fact almost shovel ready because we have the other phase of drawings planned as well, but council would approve each of those expenditures as we move forward. So this $354,000, 206 would come from what was carried over, and 150,000 would come from the fund that's being set aside for the project. So the total estimate of the architectural drawings, of course, is the percentage cost of the total building cost. So it's estimated at 1.9 million. The additional costs of 393,000 for a lean building and interactive energy and construction coordination. Construction coordinator will be confirmed later. So those would be add-ons to that. So we'll have a report and a council discussion on those items. And this would further along the project shovel ready, as I said, because one of the main criteria of the grant is that it can be done within the specified time of the construction criteria. So next slide, Debbie, please. So the second recommendation is that staff be authorized to submit a grant application under the federal funding program, Green and Inclusive Community Buildings, that Jenna went through with us. Third recommendation is that staff investigate the Green Municipal Fund financial program through FCM for the hub project, which Jenna reviewed as well. And the fourth recommendation, that staff further investigate funding opportunities through partnerships with other municipalities, organizations, fundraising, naming rights, etc. So those would be the other partnerships that we discussed earlier. So we would have a better understanding of what the potential to raise additional funds would be. Next slide, Deb, please. Okay, so the presentation was lengthy, but it was really comprehensive. So we looked at the 2021 capital project information sheet. We reviewed the status of the current pool. We presented preliminary business plans for a new pool. We looked at the 2 grant programs that Jenna spoke about. Phil spoke about the financial plans, and then I just went through the recommendations that we're asking council, that we asking the committee of the whole to consider tonight to recommend to council. So these slides will be on the township website tomorrow. For anybody watching and for council's information. And so I just want to thank this outstanding team that put the presentation together. Fantastic. And there were some people sort of behind the scenes as well. So Andras, Fania, Lori, MJ, Steve Dickey, all worked behind the scenes on this as well. So we don't want to forget them. And this was put together in about a month. So they've done some great work. So, Your Worship, I'll turn it over to you to handle the questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation.
Would you like me to stop sharing, Your Worship?
And
Yes.
yes, please. Thank you. And now we can see everybody again. Although I would note that if there is anything that a member of council asks about, we need to refer back to any of those slides, we may ask you to share again. So I turn to council. Do we have questions with regard to the presentation we've just seen? Councillor Buderick, go ahead.
Just a quick question for the Deputy Finance. Just curious for the record, if you can throw out there what the large capital project is next year that will cause us debt in 2 years?
Yeah, through your worship. It's a number of projects. It's not one in particular, but there's currently in the 2022 projection, there's some large road reconstruction that includes potentially the Odessa drainage project, which has been delayed a number of years. That's a big ticket. Potentially the Odessa fire expansion. And then it's mostly, and some relining work, but it's mostly some big, large capital road reconstruction projects. It's not one specific one, but there are multiple ones that are over $1 million. They all seem to be kind of hitting 2022 in our capital replacement schedule. So that's kind of what's doing that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I've got a bunch of, no, go ahead, Deputy.
Thank you. I have a few of them, and I didn't go by slides. I went more by speakers. So I'm not sure which staff member will be better to answer each one, but I'll just say which speaker it was when I get to it. So to begin with, the first speaker, Carrie, I just have a couple questions. And again, it may not be her that answers them, but I'll put them out there. You gave a bit of a scenario of the current situation with the pool and the deterioration and with the slab sitting on the wall and everything. And I'm by no means a pool structural engineer, but I liken it to other things that I understand a little better. So the way that that's built, as the cracks progress and the concrete deteriorates, I'm assuming that that will accelerate the deterioration because the concrete's already losing its capability of structural strength. Am I picturing this right? I'm picturing a bridge and I'm bringing it to a pool. So I'm just trying to see if I'm thinking correctly.
Through you, your worship. Yes, the short answer is yes. So if we do nothing, it will continue to deteriorate, and within 2 years, we would be most likely shutting down the pool. We can continue to make repairs, but they are short-term repairs that will extend the current life of the pool, but not much beyond that 2-year period. So we have had a structural engineer come in and do that review. He's made some recommendations to make some of those repairs to the well, to the basin, so that we can continue to get life out of it. But you're absolutely correct. Once you start seeing those cracks and the number of cracks we're seeing, the integrity of the basin will continue to deteriorate. That said, the structural engineer has assured me that, and through the report has assured us that we won't have a catastrophic failure, if you will, where all of a sudden the well just gives out. It will continue to show more and more cracking and more seepage over time.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up on that, seeing the rust at the top of the wall, again, I'm going back to another style of structure, but typically that's a real concern in my field because rusting rebar means expanding rebar, spalling, and opening additional areas for additional corrosion, which accelerates it. I'm assuming with the chemicals in the pool and everything, that would that would take it back to what I'd understand as the salt brine on the road, which would accelerate this process. Am I relating them correctly on that as well, or am I off a little bit?
Through your worship, in my conversations with the structural engineer, that's exactly what he has indicated. So we would have to take that repair and inject. I'm not an engineer, but we would inject a type of material into that crack to fix it as a temporary repair, and then reseal that area. But we will continue. It will just continue to fail over the years. So right now the pool is empty, and we're looking for a contractor to come in and make those repairs for us today.
Okay, thank you. I know those were a little more technical than what typically you would get, but I'm just trying to make sure I've got it straight in my mind. And just a comment, if I may, your worship, as well at this time. I liked seeing the slide with steps going forward if we proceed with it, with all the consultation and the input, and ensuring that we do have partners and basically users waiting for us to supply the facility to them. So, I mean, that's always nice to see, is that we're always going to be engaging the community as well. So I was glad to see that slide in there as well, Carrie. So thank you. That was all that I had for Carrie. I had some notes here for Jenna, and I wrote them down quickly, so I just have to make sure. Yes, I have just a couple of questions, Jenna. The one criteria that I saw was 25% energy improvement in order to qualify for either style of funding, either side of the funding, if I remember correctly. With the age of the equipment that's in there right now, do we have an idea of just if we moved ahead with new equipment and everything, do we have an idea what the savings would be just on that alone? And in my mind, I'm just looking at it thinking there would probably be a substantial savings right there, even if we didn't get into using the energy from the ice pad and all of that as well.
Thanks for the question. Through you, Your Worship. We have not done an in-depth review at this point of what the impact of replacing the existing equipment on its own would be. That is part of the plan of the work part of the plan of the work we're looking to do through the RetScreen software that's available ahead of submitting the application. Would be to assess all of the existing equipment as well as the proposed updates. So if council wished to see a summary of just replacing the existing equipment and the impact that that would have, that is something that we would be able to put together using this software. As it that portion of it needs to be completed in order to frame up the whole model for the impact as it is. We did have an energy audit done back in 2017, I believe. And the work that we looked at doing with that, it involved a very small portion of some of the things that are being proposed. And I believe the numbers were a 60% reduction in, sorry, I have it written down and I just want to look so that I don't misspeak. A 60% reduction in natural gas and a 21% reduction in hydro based on that audit that we had done at that point. And it did not include all of the potential heat transfer that's being proposed with respect to waste energy from the arena to the pool water and that sort of thing. It included a portion of that though.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a question on accessibility. Accessibility, I know, is critical right now, where the current pool has significant challenges. With the funding, I remember in the one slide, it showed that there was a criteria for accessibility to be eligible was the latest published requirements or guidelines or whatever it was. Is that the same for both sides of the funding, the retrofit or the new build, or is that only stipulated in the one stream?
It's for, I think it was under the eligibility piece. So it would be, it would be for either, for both streams. Yeah.
So that would be the same. Okay. And this is a hypothetical question. Chances are you may not be able to answer it, and I'm just looking at in the last couple of years, the construction costs have skyrocketed when it comes to building materials and everything. If we get moving down the road, and that I'm saying if we continue down and that happens again, typically, is there funding, like in these types of things, can we go back and use additional construction costs as justification for additional funding if needed?
That's not something we've ever had success doing in the past when we've been trying to get additional money from either the province or the federal government. So specifically in this case, like the maximum program is 25 million. We're thinking we're right on the cusp of that with what we're planning right now. So I think that would probably be unlikely. I don't know if anybody else has ever had success doing that in the past, but we have not had success with that to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. And I know that's a hard one to answer. So, but I just was trying to get a feel for it a little bit.
We did have the estimates, looked at from the conceptual standpoint this year to just make sure that, we were looking at them based on pricing from this year and not pricing from 2018 or 19 when the last update was done.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a question, and it was mentioned a couple of times, so I'm not sure. There's probably a few that could answer it. I heard the statement a few times that having an 8-lane pool will use less water than a 5-lane pool, our current 5-lane pool. is that just because of the amount of leakage, or is it that the bigger pool actually doesn't lose as much water, like from, splashing or whatever? I'm just wondering how a bigger pool can save water.
So I can do my best to answer that, and Carrie can hop in maybe if I misspeak or if I get this not exactly correct. But Andros did a lot of work looking at the existing bather load and the future bather load based on our assumptions for programming in the new pool. And there's a calculation that uses the water changing water volume based on the number of bathers in the pool in a day. And so he did the calculation that way. And then he also checked with Belleville to see what their water usage was for their new pool, which is similar to what we're proposing, and sort of tried to truth them. And they ended up being reasonably consistent. So we felt that the estimate for the future number was reasonable. And then we compared that to the existing leaking pool that we have, and it was found to be a 62% reduction.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And that's all for
Okay.
that's all for Jenna right now. Thank you. And Phil, you knew it was coming, didn't you?
I'm out. Process of elimination.
I just wanted to make sure I understood the one slide. You commented about $50,000 a year is put into pool repairs right now, is budgeted for pool repairs right now. So from what I can see over the last, few years anyway, the repairs have been fairly extensive. It appears to be more extensive as time goes on and more costly. So are we basically using up that 50,000 a year just in repairs right now?
Yeah, so on that, in 2019, we started putting the 50,000 away for the emergency repairs, kind of as a way to just protect ourselves against any completely unforeseen emergency repairs. So we do budget in the normal operations an amount for just regular maintenance or things of that nature, as well as capital projects over the last few years. There have been capital projects around replacing parts or aspects of the pool that we've budgeted through capital that aren't necessarily through that reserve. So in looking, like, if you look over the last 5 years between what we've spent, whether it's gone through operating or through capital replacement of potential pool things, it has been in the neighborhood of about almost $500,000 alone in the last 5 years. About 170 of that flowed through operating, and there was about another 330 in capital, what I would call capital replacements due to just failure. I didn't provide a detailed slide, but I could provide more information on that. So on the capital side, that was things like in 2017, there was about 35,000 spent on the current locker rooms and the change rooms, and a lot of that was around the dehumidifiers in the change rooms, as Carrie talked about earlier. Another big one in 2018 was over 100,000 on a new boiler and the new Dectron unit, whatever that is. I don't know, but I'm guessing it's important. And also in 2018, we spent about $145,000 alone on the pool basin, trying to recode it and fix all the cracks. So those went through capital and they were funded through capital. The 50,000 reserve transfer is more for just emergency that, like Carrie was saying, we're getting quotes now to get the pool some fixes now while it's drained, that if it comes in above the normal 40,000 we have in our operating budget, if it came in at 100,000, we need to bridge that $60,000 gap without going to the working funds. And that is the idea behind that 50,000. So as of right now, we haven't actually tapped into that reserve yet. So after this year's contribution, there's 150,000 in that emergency repair reserve, because we have been able, through other budget savings or, through our finance magic, pat ourselves on the back to fund it other ways. But we're just waiting for that next big ticket to kind of come down the pipe, basically.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Deputy. Others have questions? Councillor Tannen, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. First of all, my thanks to all the staff for the tremendous effort that went into putting this presentation together and keeping the Hub project alive during this tenure of council, when there's been a number of challenges that have been presented. My question is to the CAO, and I wonder if he could speak to what staff's initial intentions are with respect to public consultation process around where we're proposed to be going with this in terms of the recommendations presented to committee tonight, and that will presumably go to council. Obviously, I'm asking that from a political perspective, from council. You know, that's been part of the issue with the Hub, has always been the price tag. And of course, this is really exciting that there are funding opportunities available to assist and offset with that. But I think it's going to continue to be increasingly important for the public to be obviously kept abreast of these developments, and also consulted as to their perspective on the process. And so I just wondered, at least in the short term, what staff's intentions are around public consultation.
Your Worship, could you repeat the question, please? Sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Tannen.
I got the gist of it. Yeah. As staff, we talked about consultation because it's very important to involve the community, to engage the community right from the beginning. So we thought, well, how do we apply for the grant and at the same time consult with the public? So we came to the conclusion is that if we get the money or the funding of the grant, so allow us to again plan further with the drawings, we would provide the committees, users, the public through open house, social media, with the box or the parameters. And now 8 lanes seem to be a very important limitation for the public, for the users, especially for the swim club, so that they can host a competition. So have discussions. That's what we'll be consulting with the public about. We've talked about, Carrie hit on a lot of the different section, or a lot of the different criteria or parts of the pool, such as a viewing area. So do you have removable bleachers as part of that? So we'll be wanting to consult with the public about that. Usually you get into a lot of programming when you're doing your consultation as well. Seniors are a very active group, especially if we're talking about a therapeutic pool. Do we make allowances for scuba diving instruction, that sort of thing? So it's limitless, but it's very important to engage the public and the users at the beginning, so that we can meet their expectations as well. And some people may have expectations that we just can't meet. So it's a bit of an education program as well. So with that general public, again, through social media, it's important to reach out to the past members as well that have used the pool. Why did they stop using the pool? Is there something that we can do a little bit differently for them? The Barracudas, the school boards, and our contributing partners to ensure we're so close to the boundary of the city of Kingston. We do have a lot of Kingston users, and council at one point did talk about a non-resident fee. If Kingston are putting in some capital money, if that offer is still on the table, well, that would not qualify the Kingston residents for users fee. So we need to work through all of that. Community fundraising is, we need the public behind us to do some community fundraising as well. And then our internal stakeholders are, of course, council and staff. People see the facility, but it's council and staff who know what it takes to operate it. Great financial projections tonight. We'll have to try to live up to those. So again, consulting with the public about that, because people may hear about the pool and about a $22 million price tag and think, how can we afford that? So we need to reach out to the public and consult and say what it would actually cost you at the end of the day. So the more communication we can do with the public and different groups, the better for sure. And community consultation is certainly a priority. Did I answer your question?
A lot better than apparently my question was worth.
Anything else, Councillor Tannen? No. Anyone else have questions? I'll go to Councillor Gordon.
Hi. First, an observation on I would liken the continuing maintenance and repair and restoration and everything and what we're doing would be like telling me that you're going to restore a 1975 Ford Pinto. This is not, it's just pouring good money in after bad. So I don't see any point in doing that, continuing to do that. I do have a question though on, I believe if I didn't write the notes down, I just remember, if I understand correctly, the increased revenue from a new pool would be about almost 300,000. Was it somewhere around 3 something to 6 something? Is that, I don't know who had the, is that for Phil, I guess?
Stranier?
Was the increased revenue?
Yeah,
around
the increased revenue was about 285,000. So yeah, just around 300. Yeah, 300K. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I guess assuming that today's equipment and whatnot is there should be a lot less maintenance and whatnot, compared to something that we put in 1975. So if there's a lot less maintenance, assuming that, and I know the facilities are a little larger, but if the pool sort of looks after itself better than where does the 71% increase in the staff in, like, as far as where is that projected to be? Like what? It seems like you're almost doubling the staff, I guess. And I guess my question is, if it's less, yes, it's bigger. Yes, there's bleachers and there's a few other things that the other one. But I imagine the amount of time they spend patching things up in the old place, you should free up more time with the new pool, less maintenance, and all that. So I'm curious why the increase, because that eats up most of that 300,000.
Yeah, so that 70% increase in salary and benefits is specific to pool operating staff, and that's in the form of lifeguards, instructors. To offer that, and a big part of that is also the one new FTE for an aquatics programmer, which that in itself is salaries and benefits and all those good things, eats up about $80,000-$90,000 at the end of the day. So to provide all that programming, a lot of, and I can't speak for it, Andros good, but my kids have gotten lessons there. So they're in a swim lesson. It's an instructor for 5 kids per se, let's say, for an example. Yeah, the pool's bigger, so you can have more classes, but you're gonna have you have to have instructors to offer all those classes. So that's where it comes from. In terms of the staffing around the facility maintenance department, we kept that level in the projections so as not to influence the overall, which was probably a conservative approach, like you're saying. But the thought would be they would move more to more preventative maintenance. Yeah, they're tied up in a lot of maintenance with the existing change rooms and the existing failing stuff. But I think a facility of this size, and Belleville has shown this, it is all the new equipment and the new, and engineers could probably speak better to it, but it is complicated machinery and equipment. So there is maintenance around just maintaining a facility of that size and of that complexity. So that 70% increase in salary benefits, that is strictly pool operations. That's the new FTE for the programmer and increased instructions and lifeguards to operate a pool of that size. And there are some efficiencies you can see there, that the revenues are up 80, staffing's up 70. That's with an increased FTE. So there are some efficiencies around like the numbers allowed, but that's based on Andres's experience as the aquatics coordinator and what he would need.
Okay.
Okay,
I have another question. Just
go ahead.
Does it, let's say that hypothetically the pool was working right now, and we rent it out. I'm not that familiar with I've been up there since our kids took swimming lessons up there many years ago, but I know that our skating rink, for example, was decreasing in revenue due to, I guess, less interest from even not only our community, but from outside as far as renting it. So would a new, I get, maybe you mentioned it in there, but do you anticipate a new pool? And again, with the 8 lanes and would we be able to keep our local people happy, but would we also be able to rent it out a lot more than we have been? Or like, is there that much interest out there? I'm just curious.
Maybe
like
Carrie could answer
like how much
that.
downtime would there be in a pool? It's open 7 days a week. It could be open from 8. You know, is there seniors groups? Would there be that much interest to expand that revenue? I guess.
Okay, I'll turn to Carrie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm having video issues. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. As it relates to demand on the pool, right now we have quite a few different programs that are at capacity, and we are turning customers away. So things like daytime programming, Aquafit, and our seniors programs are definitely high demand programs. So we anticipate that we will be able to increase the offerings for those programs. We also know that the primetime pool hours of, let's say, 3 to 8 p.m., 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., those are well used hours by both the swim club, as well as that is the time period where our community is looking for Red Cross programming, learn to swim programs, things of that sort. So the bigger pool will allow us to maximize the requests during those times to both meet the needs of the swim club as well as meet the needs for the individual customers that are coming in that aren't participating in a swim club setting, but still want to be able to participate, learn how to swim, and enjoy the facility. We would then be looking to community partners, and that's part of the community consultation, is to determine what other agencies that are out there that would be looking to help partner with the town or with the township to be able to offer programming in the facility. The school board does have a Swim to Survive program in their mandate. So those are the types of programs we'd be looking at.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Other questions? Not seeing any hands at the moment. I've got a couple while I'm at it. One of the things that was brought to my attention a number of years ago with regard to the pool was the question between a 25-meter pool and a 50-meter pool. I know that we're kind of settled on the 25, but can someone express why? I'm thinking that would likely be Carrie.
Carrie might not have the history, Your Worship, but Jenna has been here as well. I'm not sure if Jenna can help us out or not.
I don't think I can. I'm sorry. It's always been the discussion that we've had with the operations staff that a 25-meter pool is what's desirable. It's the increase to 8 lanes that's been talked about the most in terms of being, having a benefit to being able to host meets and those sorts of things. But I have not heard, I can't really remember ever having heard a discussion about whether we wanted to increase to a 50-meter versus a 25.
Okay. My conversations with some competitive swimmers early on had suggested that, but as I say, I accept the idea that a 25 is likely more viable for us. A couple other questions. In the financial report, so this is Phil, there was a lot of conversation about the cost of utilities, both water and hydro. Do we know what we're currently paying in natural gas and hydro costs specifically for the pool?
Yeah, through your worship. So right now, the way we expense costs, it's more done as a facility as a whole, and then we do a back end internal allocation between the arena, pool, and the library. So if you're looking at the true cost, it'd be more the cost of the facility. The internal allocation is more just an estimate, which hasn't been updated in a while. But if you're looking at the facility as a whole in 2019, for example, gas was around $50,000 for the facility as a whole. Water would be in the neighborhood of about, water and sewer, I should say, would be in the neighborhood of about 130,000. And hydro was around 120,000 for the facility as a whole, as the W.J. Henderson facility.
And so this, again, we don't know what portion of that is appropriate for just the pool, but a 60% savings within those categories would end up being significant dollars towards future operations.
Yeah, so for water and sewer right now, for example, like it's on 1 meter, so that's why it's kind of hard to pinpoint arena versus pool. But
okay, thank you. With regard to the grant applications, I note that that July 6th is the deadline date when we have to get that in. But do we have a sense at this point when the applications will be approved? What the ministry timing is for that? Quite often it takes quite a while.
Yeah. Through your worship, Jenna may have a better idea than I do. There is no provincial involvement this time. So that's one level of government we wouldn't have to wait for approval from. So it would just be the federal government. And it's our understanding that this is also a recovery program from COVID. So that's why they're looking for projects that are ready or near ready to go. It's an employment program. So all of those things work to our benefit. But I don't know, Jenna, I can see maybe 3 months at the earliest.
Yeah, I think that's probably reasonable. I'm trying to look in the guide and I'm not seeing any specifics. But if I find it in the next little bit, then I can jump back in.
So okay. I'm thinking fall, probably October. That would.
Okay, thank you. And with regard to the FCM $5 million loan with potential 25% grant, what's the interest rate on that?
Through your worship, it just says competitive rates. It doesn't explicitly state what the rates are.
Okay, so it's likely similar, I'm assuming, then to what Infrastructure Ontario would offer or something like that. It just happens to give the bonus of the 25% grant. Okay.
I see Phil has come on, your worship. Perhaps he has an idea.
No, I do not. But I would expect it to be, hey, I'm honest. I would expect it to be competitive around the current 3%. But I mean, if 25% is forgivable, we can deal with a point something percentage difference from a financing point of view.
Absolutely. Okay, and then my final question, in the financial calculations that Mr. Renier showed us, it was listed at an estimated 1.5 million in other municipalities and other fundraising, naming, etc. Do I recall correctly? I realize that we'd have to go back to the city to confirm, but the city of Kingston, I believe, a few years ago made a commitment of approximately 1.5 million towards this project once we get it off the ground. Do we have any current estimates or I'll say comparables when you looked at Belleville and other projects, what they managed to raise in naming or fundraising, et cetera, over and above the 1.5 that we've got in theory from the city?
Through your worship, Lori may have some ideas as well. currently, there's some infrastructure money being allocated. So the town of Prescott just went through a naming rights. And then Lori was telling me this morning, was it Arnprior or Renfrew, Lori?
Renfrew.
Renfrew. Also, so we'll be reaching out to those partners for sure to get some sort of estimate. Now, when we talk to other communities, there could be a reason why they may have been able to generate more money through naming rights, either whether it be a family or a large industry that's local that wants to take it on. But that would be, we do discuss with Belleville quite often about other funding avenues that they were able to tap into. And we did provide actually the city of Kingston with a copy of our report as well. So they know that we're continuing on. But again, we would have to initiate that discussion with the city of Kingston.
Absolutely. Okay, that was my questions that I wrote down during the presentation.
Lori, did you have anything else you wanted to ask? You're gone already. Sorry. No. Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Other members of council, do you have questions? Seeing none. Okay. We do have some recommendations with the report provided, but this is committee of the whole. So I'm looking for discussion about the recommendations and future directions for council. At the end of the day, we do need to make some recommendations. Anybody want to express an opinion? Does anybody want to make them? Okay, Deputy, go ahead.
Seeing how you put it out there, I asked a lot of questions. I might as well give an opinion. I guess face value, there's some scary numbers here. I mean, it's a lot of money for the township. And I know that we can't do it without funding. So I guess that's where my whole mindset is right now is we have to be ready for funding, but we can't really go too far without knowing that we have money coming in to be able to go further than that. So I see the value in trying to get it as shovel ready as possible without expending a lot of money that may become outdated before we actually are able to do something if the funding doesn't come through. It gave me a little more comfort when I heard some of the explanations about the calculations that they did and everything, and then it was backed up, that staff did, and then it was backed up by actually talking to other communities that have gone through this, that are in this process, that are, aware of the needs and being able to prove that the calculations were validated, I guess is the simplest way to put it. So I do, as much as I am, the large numbers are very concerning. If we don't move ahead with something, then the only alternative that I see is not too far down the road, we're going to end up without a facility because it'll just deteriorate to the point where we won't be able to maintain it any longer. So we almost have to keep looking ahead or else we're just going to stop and let it go.
Absolutely. Other members of council? Any comments? I will express that at this point, I'm looking at this as, the principal recommendations in the here are about applying for the grants. Ultimately, we have to ask for the money. We have to keep pushing the province that, well, in this case, the federal government and FCM to support us in these. And if we can get those monies, then yes, I think it's time to move ahead. Because as the deputy mayor says, we're not going to have a pool in the next couple of years if we don't. Yes, it is big numbers and scary numbers, and we need to further. And the fourth recommendation is the need to further investigate other areas and other ways we can generate some revenue towards this project. The only real costly decision today, from what I'm seeing, is the idea of adding $150,000 towards the next level of drawings, the next level of preparation. And as staff have said, as I understand what staff have said, spending that money now means that we're much more likely to get to be at the top of the list for these grant applications. So adding $150,000 towards what is likely to be a $20 to $25 million project, I personally think is well worth it. And if I'm understanding the timelines involved correctly, would likely be chargeable against the, because it was April 1st was the point at which the monies could be spent. So we're past that, and hopefully those monies can be back charged against this granting, assuming we get it. Other comments? I'm seeing, Councillor Buderick, go ahead.
I echo the same sentiments the deputy had, the fact that it is a large number, but you are correct, your chair, on saying it's, I mean, this isn't a large outlay to look into and investigate the possibilities of having either the federal government or the FCM offer some money up. And I would put forth a motion to accept all 4 recommendations in the agenda.
Thank you. I'll accept that motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Townend, so seconded. Thank you. Move or further comment?
None other than what yourself and the deputy have already echoed. I don't see after this year's budget, if we don't get any funding, to try and see how that would go over. So I would really like to see the staff pull a rabbit out of a hat, which I guess you could say, because I think that some serious funding would be required, but that's all.
Thank you. Seconder comment? Nothing? Anyone else have comment? And just while I'm checking, did we lose Councillor Gordon? Councillor Gordon, can you still hear me?
Hello.
Hello, you are. Did we lose you for a moment there?
It's all, anyway, it's plugged in and charging, and it won't charge. So I'm at 2%. But
okay.
So,
okay, did you want to comment on the motion?
No. Just a second. We're getting another charger here. We'll see if it's I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have comment? And seeing none. And I don't, oh, there you are. Councillor Gordon's back. Okay. With that, if there's no further comments, is there no further discussion? And we have a motion to approve the recommendation with all 4 parts. Okay. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the committee of the whole this evening? Seeing none, I look to a motion to adjourn. Deputy, so moved, seconded by Councillor Townend. And call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Motion is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I think we got it in, and Councillor Gordon's battery survived. Have a good evening and enjoy this weather we're having.